You're listening to the CDD-Ghana Democracy Dialogues podcast, a platform for meaningful conversations on governance, democracy, and development. From policy discussions to citizen perspectives, we explore key topics like electoral reforms, economic policies, and human rights. Join the conversation on YouTube, Spotify, and our website. Stay informed, stay inspired.
Hello, my name is Mami Akuya Amwachum. I am a communications specialist here at CDD Ghana, and today I'd like to welcome you all to the CDD Ghana Democracy Dialogue podcast, where we look into the most interesting and pressing political and governance issues. In today's episode, we're discussing the topic, the 2024 elections in Ghana, making sense of opinion and election polls. Now, here's a little bit of background. It's been 3 months since Ghana went to the polls, and today we're here to reflect on the elections, but also to analyze the role of opinion and election polls. For instance, were the polls accurate? If not, what went wrong? And what can we learn from this experience moving forward, seeing that there are going to be so many elections in the years to come? And so, to help us unpack these questions, I have a group of amazing experts, as I call them, to do just that. So, we have in the house Dr. John Osai Kwapon, who is a personal friend, but he's also a political scientist and a governance expert. He holds a PhD in political science from George Mason University. But he's also a CDD's Democracy and Development Fellow and also director for the Democracy Project. And now I would encourage all of you to follow the Democracy Project on the various social media platforms. He also specializes in teaching research methods and data analysis. There's also Dr. Kwame Sapon, who is also a Democracy and Development Fellow in Public Health at CDD Ghana. He's a pharmacist by profession with tons of years of practice to his name, and he's lectured in so many places, including Ghana and the United Kingdom. And next speaker is Vera Ado, my fellow lady at CD Ghana. She's a programs officer with expertise in elections, governance, gender, and accountability. She played a key role as a project coordinator for CODEO during Ghana's 2024 elections. And maybe Vera will have some time to talk about CODEO and the role they played during the elections. But she's very passionate about advocating for better voter education, particularly for first-time voters. And last but not the least, we have Mr. Musa Dankwa, who is the Executive Director and Head of Global Research at Global Info Analytics. He's also the lead pollster, providing clients with insights into geopolitical issues, political risk, and elections. He's what I call my polling expert. I'll start with you, John, Dr. Osai Kopon. So, like I mentioned earlier, we just concluded our elections. Now, just to be frank, some polls predicted that President Mahama will win, but so did some prophets. So my question is, what makes polling more special? And just to follow up with that, if you look at the polls leading up to the elections, how well do you think the polls predicted the actual results?
Thank you very much, Mami. So you're correct. We had pollsters predicting a win for President Mahama. We also saw some polls that actually predicted a win for Dr. Baumia. And then we had the prophets, the religious persons. Also, some predicted a win for John Mahama, and also some that said Dr. Baumia would win the election. In my opinion, I think what sets polling apart from the prophecies is that one is based on the voice of the people, and the other is based on what these prophets see whether it's in their dreams or whatever God communicates to them, because they tend to let us know that they're speaking on a revelation that has come to them, in the sort of spiritual, metaphysical world, however you want to discuss that world. But what sets polling apart from that is the approach that, when polls are done well, is, you use, right? So there's something, quote unquote, more scientific and more empirical about polls, where you are carefully designing who you want to ask the question of voting intentions, how you want to approach that question, when you want to ask them that question, and how you want to present what they say in the end when your polling is done. Now, you ask yourself then, how come that you get different polls with different results? And part of it is, for me, is a question of also methodology, right? All of these things, in terms of how you go about it, who you select, where you select from, all of those things can affect the outcome of your poll. And so when polls differ, and some, quote unquote, get it right and some get it wrong, for me, the key question that you have to then ask is, you want to probe them on how sound was their methodology, what was their methodological approach, because that can get you to understand why they reached a certain conclusion. But at least you know that that is what makes polling different from what the pastors say. Now, you would also ask yourself, the pastors, some who said John Mahama would win, some who said Bawumia would win. Did they hear from, did they get a different revelation, a different, God spoke to them, things like that. So the same thing is what posters have to deal with, but it really boils down to the soundness of one's methodology. The last point is, how accurate did they get it? I think the one poll that stood out in this election was the poll from Global Info Analytics, which is headed by Mr. Musa Dankwa. And what made his polling stand out is that it was not one point in time. Now, it doesn't mean that a one point in time poll cannot get it right. If you look back to 2016, for example, Professor Usu Mensah did just one poll, but was able to show that it was likely the NPP was going to win the election. But what was different about 2024 with Global Info Analytics was you had snapshots in time. So you could see how the polls were trending, where, things were either sometimes getting close, or where sometimes the race was, becoming either more competitive, vulnerabilities for both the incumbent as well as the main challenger. And ultimately, they got it right. I think the one thing that also made Global Info Analytics get it right is they listened to feedback. So Mr. Dankwa will tell you, he and I regularly will talk. One of the things that I would always say to him is that in the very initial polls, I used to see a lot more male respondents than female respondents. And I would say to him, our electorate is slightly more female than male. So please keep an eye for that. And one of the things he would do to correct for that was also the weighting of the data. So that made him stand out and get the election results as accurate as he could in terms of polling predictions.
Right. Thank you very much. I'm actually surprised that you mentioned that one of the polls that really stood out for you is Global Info Analytics, because I was just discussing with him, with Mr. Danko, about whether he had criticism during the elections, and he tells me, oh yeah, he had a fair share of it. So Mr. Danko, I'll be coming to you to talk about that. So just hold on to that thought. But I would ask Dr. Sapon, Dr. Sapon, do you think there were some major strengths and weaknesses of the 2024 election polls in Ghana? And has that got anything to do with public trust in polling? As in, has public trust in polling increased or declined based on this year's election cycle? What do you think?
Okay, thanks. It's an interesting question. To be honest, it's very um difficult to quantify public trust in polling in Ghana. And the simple reason is that we are two partisan. So when a poll comes out and say it favors one party or the other, the default is for the party that is not favored to bash the poll, and for the party that is favored to celebrate the poll. So I always have this conversation with John, and I'm like, my training in statistics, because I trained in dealing with medicines and human beings, is critical to very small numbers. Because I remember my research method lecturer telling me that, look, but what we are doing, a zero point 0.2 deviation might lead to the death of people or significant, what you call side effects to people. So anytime I pick a poll, John will tell you that the first thing I look at is the methodology, and then I look at the trends. I do not look at, oh, who's winning or who's losing or who has the percentages, but I look at the trends, and then I look at the margin of error.
I think it's great to hear Dr. Sapong and Dr. Saikopo talk about your work, leading up to the elections. But like I said, throughout the season, your polling data was challenged. So how did you navigate these criticisms? And again, I'd like to link it back to public trust. What does that say about public trust in polling in Ghana?
During the initial stage of our work, people like Professor Kwapong and some people call out behind the scene from the University of Ghana to discuss some of the methodologies and approach. Sometimes we justify why we are using that approach and why we don't think the approach they are discussing will give us the best outcome. So we have refined our methodologies over time to a point where we believe that we have the right methodologies to be able to predict the results accurately. If you noticed, we had been doing field polls for the past 2.5 years, almost 3 years. But in the last 6 weeks before the election, we switched to telephone polls because of our experiences with humans or Ghanaians in particular. A lesson that we withdrew from the 2020 elections. When you get very close to election and you are talking to people face to face in the field, they tend to be very cagey at that time. So we believe that calling them over the phone was the best way to get them to speak freely and without any hindrance. So basically, we use the telephone polls to correlate, to try and triangulate the field polls. And they were actually in sync with each other. So it gave us the confidence. Now, in terms of criticisms, I mean, it wasn't surprising to us because it's a very heated political season and everybody looks at your poll with political lens. And indeed, people think that maybe you may have taken money from party A or party B to do this poll. Once it favors party A, they think you are working for party A. Or it favors party B, it means you are favoring party B. But what surprised me was that people fail to ask themselves, who will pay for this poll, for the global info to divulge everything about somebody's strengths and weaknesses for all to see in plain light? I think it didn't, I don't know, but somehow they lost that. And we took comfort in the sense that we had international organizations like Fitch Solutions, Oxford Economics, Goldman Sachs, all calling us to collect our data. And these guys are people who understand data very well and polling very well. If they didn't see anything good with our polls, I don't think they would have been calling us for that such data. So we believe that regardless of the criticisms, I think we're doing something right. So that gave us the kind of confidence and the what we call the vim to continue doing what we were doing.
Well,
in terms of trust, again, look, the Ghanaian voters have been polarized between MPP and NDC. And in some cases, deliberately so by the politicians. Because once they trust your polls, it means it could kind of affect confidence among their voters, and in some cases turnout, because the poll numbers can be used in different ways. It can be used to galvanize your base, or it can demoralize your base if you don't find a way to fight back with that poll. And indeed, I saw that when I went to the Upper West Region sometime November last year, where I saw firsthand a party using my name in its campaign in remote areas not to trust my polls because it's not true. And it tells me that, yes, they knew the effect that the polling numbers could have, and they were trying to fight it vigorously. And indeed, to some extent, you understand it.
Well, I think I should say congrats to you and your team for a great job done in the last election season. Just keep going for us, right? But coming to you, Vera. I mean, let's leave these data aspects. You and I are just consumers of polling. So tell me from your perspective, what was your expectation? And what was that expectation based on?
So one, I would say the trend or historical trend of how Ghanaians have been voting. I think that has been highlighted by previous speakers about how our political landscape is really polarized between two major political parties. So it's it's dominated by both between the MPP and then the NDC. And so for me, the expectation was that there's going to be a shift. So that's what I was looking at. There were also a lot of protests going around, and which I was also even part of some of the protests on the street. So I realized that there was going to be a shift, knowing that a lot of more young people are going out to vote. And when you have a more voter turnout for when young people are going out there to vote, it means that there's going to be some shifts or there's going to be a change. And for me also as someone who coordinated the Kodio project, it means that you have to look at polls to see if it is consistent with your data. We try to observe all the election cycle. So we are looking at the pre-election phase. We are observing the registration, the campaign, the voter education. And it's important also for the electoral processes. As an election observer group, we keep updating the public about our observations. So it was a lot of mix. It based on our historical context, the current issues happening with the rise of active youth participation on the streets and sharing their own frustrations, also the economic challenges and how Ghanaians generally have voted, and that's what we're looking at for.
You're right about that, Vera. I know for Afrobarometer Ranten data that we conducted in August 2024, we asked how many Ghanaians partook in demonstration, and 6% said they did. And now I know you're part of that 6% because you just mentioned that you took to the street. But still staying with you, Vera, just to pick your mind on this, that public opinion polls definitely plays a huge role in shaping narratives before elections. I mean, Dr. Sapon has said it. Usually when there's a poll out there, Mr. Danko has said it. All people see is that, well, if global info analysis says this party A is going to win, and that is this, right? So there's just discussion about that. But do you think the media, the Ghanaian media, actually uses polling data responsibly, or there's a risk of misinformation somewhere?
Yes, so there have been some strengths in there using the polls. We've seen some media outlets that will collaborate well with the polls, so they're able to tell us the news as it is. Some of them have also done some fact check using the polls. Are you able to? I think the media is supposed to do some due diligence so that we don't just use the polls out there and throw it. So where is this polls coming from? Are you able to vet? What's the methodology? So before the media comes out with the publicizing or publishing any post, there must be some due diligence. And so that is where sometimes you are likely to risk some misinformation, especially where there's also some level of sensationalism. We saw global info analytics, and then all of a sudden there was another post from the lecturer from KUST. I can't remember his name But then there was a whole publication. The media was excited about it. So sometimes the sensationalism comes up and they want to have a new headline, and so they are quick to be the one reporting it. So there's no conversation or question about what was the sample size, the geographic analysis about some of this, what's the methodology, the margin of error. So these are the questions that needed to. In fact, I observed, I joined in a Twitter space where a journalist was interviewed both Mr. Musa Danko and the lecturer from KUST. And the line of question, that's when I realized, okay, I don't think this journalist understands statistical principles about pooling and using statistical sample for some of this work. Could you use statistical sampling to be able to get our period VT data? We actually use the actual figures from the field. We don't do the pools. But if you understand this principle, you are able to appreciate statistics or data or pooling. But if you are not able to vet the process and some of them, some biases come up. So that is when we risk out some misinformation and how the confidence at which they are able to come out with some of this. So I think that it will be important for the media really to appreciate or understand the pooling. And so the methodology is important, putting up your methodology. And it's not about the number, the total number of people we are able to speak out to. So when the line of questioning came out and the journalist kept asking Mr. Musa, so how do you use this small number to predict? I'm like, okay, do you understand what you're saying? It's not about the number of people you're able to speak out to. If your sample is right, if you get it correct, then it means that you should be able to have an accurate and tell us your margin of error or your confidence level about this. So I think that is where we risk if the media is not able to do due diligence. And first, if they themselves do not understand statistical principles, how pooling is done, then it means that you are risking them having putting information out there without doing the due diligence or asking the relevant question as to the methodology of whatever pools the person is putting out there. So I think we need to find a way to improve.
Right. Thank you so much. That's a lot to unpack. And I think I'd like for us to stay a bit more on discussing the reliability of polling. But I think I want to throw this to Dr. Sapon because you mentioned about the public trust. It's a bit difficult to measure whether the trust in polling has increased or declined. My question is, and based on what Vera said about the media, what can be done to improve public understanding of how to interpret these poll results?
Okay, thanks. I think there is generally a lack of appreciation of statistics across the country. It's not just got to do with polling. You see it in every facet of our endeavor, where when data is put out, people are quick to either attack or support the data, depending on where their political lineage is. And when you go to the bottom of it, and especially when you're on social media, or for me in the health space, when you're debating even people who work for government, and you start unpicking their own data, that out in health, you realize that the person who's speaking to the data doesn't even understand the data he's been giving, because probably the data has been put out by the Ghana Statistical Service or by the WHO or by the Ministry of Health. But because they do not have the rigor to understand the data, they're just speaking to the numbers. And that is something that we have to address as a country, because it underpins everything we do. It shows up in how we approach our development. It shows up in how we handle our economy. It shows up in how people don't even understand the difference between things like qualitative numbers and quantitative numbers. And you listen to people speak on radio or on TV or write on social media, you realize that they're jumbling both together. And they don't even have an idea how you calculate a sample size from a general population, so that you can know that this is the sample size I need, and based on the population spread across the country, to realize that then if this is the sample size I need, then for each region, or if it's for an economic, for maybe each sector, these are the number of people I need to sample. And then looking at the gender bias to see, based on even those areas, how to get the gender bias right, so that the sample, when you get the raw data back and you analyze it, the outcomes are robust enough. A lot of people don't understand it. And until we start working on that as a country, it's always going to show up. It would just not be in, what do you call it, polling data like happened to Musa. It will show up in everything from when budgets are read to everything. And we just have to deal with it.
Right. Thank you so much. You know, I smiled when you mentioned the sample size because it's always been a big point for Afrobarometer surveys, and we always get bombarded with these questions about, well, how can you speak to just 1,600 people and say that's representative of the whole country, right? So that's just put a smile on my face. But thank you. And I'd like to move to Mr. Dankwa. I'm still talking about reliability of polling, and it's a thing that you do. Based on the conversations and insights from both Vera and Dr. Sapon, what do you think are the key reforms we need to improve the reliability of election polls in Ghana? And whilst you think about that, are there some best practices from other countries you've worked, or other countries you know that you think Ghana can adopt to enhance polling credibility?
We have a number of kind of proposals we think may help going forward when it comes to polling in Ghana. One, we believe that polling for elections should be conducted by institutions, not individuals. So if you want to do polls for national elections, I believe it should be done under an institution, and that will improve the credibility and reliability of that. Why am I saying that? Because an institution can open its books and show where their funding source is coming from, whether from other NGOs or think tanks, whatever it is, you can show. And if you are a company like us doing polling, then you should tell us how you are funding it. Is it a CSR or who is paying for it? I think it's very, very important. Another thing we should be doing is that any entity that wants to conduct election polls should publish at least its polling calendar, so that we know that this time of the year a poll will come out. This time of the year a poll will come out. That prevents a situation where somebody does a poll just to drown a poll that has just been released. And that's what they sometimes do. When our polls come out, that is when you see all the polls being released by other people, just to drown the polls that we've just released. So if you have a calendar, then nobody will accuse you of trying to drown a poll that has been released. Also, I mean, as I mentioned, we should publish our source of funding. It's very important we do that. And then also, transparently, we should present our methodology and approach in conducting these polls comprehensively. It gives people a chance to look at what may be right and what may be wrong, and then they could decide to take the poll with a pinch of salt, or they take it with seriousness. These are the few things that I think we can do here. And also, I mean, any company that does poll should have code of ethics. We do have code of ethics as a company that guides how we do our business and even how our officers in the field behave, and how we expect them to disclose any conflict of interest. Indeed, we've done polls recently where some of the field officers were known to relate some of the subjects we were doing polling on. And when we got to know that, we had to withdraw them from the field and annul every work that they have done from the beginning, and sent in a new team to go and cover the same subject. So we take this quite seriously. So it is something that helps, that will help companies and people who work in the field to appreciate the need to be ethical in doing polling. In terms of best practices, I think ethics and practices is one important that we should really push for companies doing polling to have. And then also have certain best practices like responsibility for clients or sponsors. If you are doing a poll, it's a sponsored poll. Normally, you should indicate who is sponsoring it. For example, maybe an NGO could contact us to do a poll on certain social issues. We should disclose who is funding it, so that people know who is funding it. We've done some polls in the past for Good Governance Africa, and we had to disclose who the funding was, who were funding that poll. And that poll was on political violence in Ghana. So it is very important. We have this kind of disclosures. And also, they should be able to let the public understand the value to them of polling and to the society as a whole. We always tell them in the field that, yes, some people may be able to call radio stations and get heard, but not many get that chance. But if you speak to us, your voices will be kind of consolidated and reported. And those who are in charge of whatever the issue is may be able to respond collectively to your voice. So it is very important that you speak to us honestly and sincerely, and that your concerns will go up there. So this is something we tell people every time we go to the field, and that opens made it easy for us to discuss things with them. Also, it is very important that we have sort of complaint in the field. When we are doing polls, we give out numbers of people in the head office that if you have any concern, you call us to complain. So people get this information, and sometimes they do call us, right? And that is helping to boost confidence between ourselves and the general voters, to the extent that these days it doesn't take us any effort to get people to talk to us. They've heard us, they've heard about us, they've heard what we do, and they believe that we really speak their voices. And for that matter, it's made life very easy for us in the field. These are a few things I think we can
Right.
about best practices that polling companies should emulate.
Right. Thank you so much for those great insights. And I think I'll just like for us to move into the role of technology in polling. And I would like to start with you, John, seeing that you're a data analyst person. I guess the question is, digital campaigns and social media analytics are increasingly used to gauge public sentiment, right? We see it play out in so many ways and forms. But do you think these tools can complement traditional polling methods?
Yes, they can. And in fact, if you look at the 2024 election season, you actually saw a more intensified use of social media handles for the campaign. If you compare 2016 to 2020 and 2024, you actually see that growth in the use of social media. And even if you put it in context, if we go to Afrobarometer, in round 6, when the question was asked, how often do you get news from the following sources, social media news, and it mentioned the different social media handles, Facebook, Twitter, etc., etc. Those who said every day in round 6, this is 2014, was about 11.6%. So you round it off to 12%. But by round 10 in 2024, it was 35%. So over a period of a decade, you have almost a 24% growth in persons who actually go to social media every day for news. Now, if you add two other categories, those who say a few times a month and then those who say a few times a week, the growth between round 6, 2014 and round 10 is a whooping 18% to 55%. So that growth tells you that our voters are also engaging various social media platforms. Yes, it comes with its own challenges because the same AB data in round 8 also pointed the fact that there are, a lot more people also say they don't tend to trust news from social media. They believe that social media users spread false information. But when you put it all together, there's a way that these new handles can allow us to gauge the mood of the electorate. In 2024, all you had to do was to go to some of the major news portals, and when they share a story, either with John Mahama's picture or something that John Mahama had said that generated the news compared to something that the outgoing president, Nana Akufo-Addo, had said or Dr. Bawumia had said. And you could see the sentiments and you could read into that sentiment to at least get a sense of what the public was feeling or what the public was thinking. But I do agree that as we do traditional polling, like the work of the likes of Global Info Analytics, they can be also very well supplemented with the mood that we pick on social media. You just ought to be very careful where and which pages that you're picking that from, because if you're not careful, you could pick very highly biased mood ending on whose page or which platform on social media, not also forgetting the fact that these days there are a lot of fake accounts that can also spread, fake news and propaganda and all of those things. But notwithstanding all of these challenges, the increasing use of social media by voters presents us with a new opportunity to be able to supplement traditional polling data with gauging the mood of the electorate based on sentiments expressed on these various social media handles.
Right. And just continuing from that word of caution you gave over there, I'd like to ask Dr. Sapon, how do you think we can ensure that these digital tools do not introduce biases into the polling data?
Well, I think that will be down to the methodology of the person doing the polls. When I listened to Musa earlier, he said that they shifted from face-to-face interviews to telephone interviews because they pick the bias that people get cagey when it's getting closer to the elections. Likewise, I'm quite sure that anyone who uses social media would know that even now people can have artificial accounts and bots and other things that might come in to actually try and skew a poll if you try to do it online and other things. So it would be down to the pollsters to have, as part of their methodology, ways of weighing and weighting the data such that it can tear out any risks thereof from what do you call it, social media manipulation. And that's the only way it can be done. But the truth of the matter is, as we move ahead, like, as John has picked up, that you can tell even from Afrobarometer that the use of social media is increasing rapidly. And if you look at even the numbers globally, it's also increasing rapidly. It would be unmeritorious for anyone to say that social media would not be used as a tool to conduct polls. It's going to get to the point where maybe it might end up even becoming the main driver of polling for many countries. The question therefore would be, yes, it's going to be, it's like now you go onto a lot of countries and they'll tell you that footfall on their high streets is lower than footfall on what do you call it, portals online and other things like that. Human beings are just becoming more adapted to social media and the use of the internet and other things. So we need to just accept that that's what's going to happen. The question then becomes, how do we ensure that methods are robust enough to prevent the manipulation of these areas? And that for me would be the big question. Otherwise, you cannot do anything about social media. It's the new thing.
You're right. Thank you so much. And Mr. Dankwa, did you hear Dr. Sapon? You need to find a way. We can avoid it. But the thing is that technology and big data are playing a role, let's say a large role in elections globally. So from your perspective and from the work that you did, how did technology shape the polling accuracy in Ghana's 2024 elections?
For us, we spent a lot of money to acquire very expensive polling tool.
Mm.
A tool that gives us the chance to analyze the big data we've been collecting for the past 3.5 years. In a way, we couldn't have done so if we had used those mainstream, the ones that are used online and stuff like that. So we put a lot of investment to it. We're able to aggregate over 300,000 data and analyze it in one go. So we're seeing a lot more than we're reporting. Also, knowing our people, fake officers, there must be some kind of quality control checks within the system to be able to tell you that somebody is not doing his work right. So if we ask you to go to Kwesiminti and you go to Shama, we will know. So the GPS that will come from the submission will tell us exactly where you work. So it enables us to see exactly whether the sample is coming from where it's supposed to be picked or somewhere else. Indeed, we also have a system that is able to record the conversation remotely without the field officer activating any code. So that means that if you just sit somewhere and be filling the questionnaire, we would know. And also, there's an inbuilt AI. Normally, when somebody is filling a questionnaire without interviewing anybody, certain pattern is identified in the way the responses are given. It picks those patterns and flag it up using an AI. So when we see that a flag, it will be flagged, and somebody at the back end will call to find out what is happening in the field. So these are the things that we use to help us to really understand what is going on. And now we also add a bit of social media to these polls. There is a tool we have which is able to scan all the social media platforms and see comments being made about the candidates, whether they are positive comments, neutral, or negative, and put them in a kind of summary. So you could see those candidates that are attracting positive comment and those who are attracting negative comment. And those getting negative comment clearly are not going to win the election. We did this in the NDC party elections, and it was proven right. And the same thing was done in this election to give us an additional backup to see whether the sentiment of voters is what is being reflected in the social media. Yes, and this system that we use is able to identify the bots. So it doesn't take every comment. It takes the account before it includes the account comment in the analysis. So it gives you a good sense of what is happening. And also the social media, I spent a lot of time on some of the social media platforms, especially the TikTok. TikTok has been one of the most revolutionary platform for this election.
Wow.
Yes. I mean, everybody is there. Whether you can read or you can not read, because it doesn't require you to be able to read. Just install the app and record a video and forward and share, and that is it. And it gave voters the chance to respond to political figures directly. If you see something that doesn't go down well with voters, they won't do a video and tag you, and you hear what they're telling you. And I think that was an empowerment that we've never seen in this election or in this country since the Fourth Republic. People have been empowered by the social media, and they're able to really challenge the political class in a way that was never seen before.
Wow, that's really interesting. I was happy to hear you mention AI, and I think I'd like to take this conversation another time with you for us to further discuss how AI, contributes to this whole technology polling, people's opinion is one thing I'm very interested in. But here's another segment that I am so curious about, looking at the polls beyond elections, in the sense of its impact on governance, because elections come and go, right? But then governance is with us every day. So it's important we look at the connection. And I think I'd want for all of you to give me your perspective on this. So starting with you, Dr. Kwapon, my question is, should polling data be used to guide government policies beyond elections? Or maybe for reasons that maybe you can explain to us, we should just limit its influence to electoral predictions as we know it to do?
Yeah, I think it should go beyond just using it to predict elections. And a professor in graduate school who would always say that when people fight over polling data or survey related data, whether it's accurate or not, the way she always would describe it is just look at it and ask yourself, what kinds of signals are people sending on whatever question that you're trying to ask them, or whatever issue you're trying to gauge their mood in. So let me go back to Afrobarometer round 9, 2022. That was a non-election year. There were questions about e-levy, right? So if you look at the set of e-levy questions, if you're a policymaker, you ask yourself two questions. One, that even whilst there seemed to be disapproval over over the e-levy in terms of the support level for e-levy wasn't there, you also realize that there was a question about, will e-levy let you stop using electronic transactions? And there, Ghanaians were very divided, closely divided. It was not very clear cut. There were also some skepticism about whether the government would be able to use revenue from e-levy to do development. So if you're a policymaker, you say to yourself, okay, the levels of support for e-levy is really not there, but the voters are, or at least Ghanaians are also signaling that they may not necessarily abandon the use of electronic transactions. So how do I shape this policy if I really want to still go ahead with e-levy? Maybe if the threshold is 1%, maybe can I cut it down to maybe 0.5%? Can I target it at particular type of transactions? For me, those are the kinds of signals that a policymaker, government officials can take from poll survey data in non-election years to help them shape some policies, some programs that they are thinking about.
Right. That's really great, John. And jumping to you, Vera. I know you deal with the media a lot. So just speak to me from the media perspective. How do you think that post-election polls should be used to hold elected officials accountable?
Okay, right. And Mami, if you permit me, I wanted to have a bite on the use of technology for the polling.
Okay.
So for what Cordio did, we had officers on the field. We had 31 regional supervisors, we had constituency supervisors, we had over 3,000 election observers. And so what we did was that we partnered with Pens Plus Byte, which had the tool for checking and fact checking, so that they were tracking what was happening on social media and how we're able to have some verification using our officers on the field. So we recognize that having officers on the field alone wasn't enough, and the role that social media was playing. And Pens Bladvat also realized that to be able to do fact checking, it means that you need to also speak to people on the field sometimes. And so we had this partnership to also assist us, and using the technology and plus the field officers was an amazing thing. And for us also, more importantly, was the recruitment, and Mr. Musa mentioned it. So recruitment was important for us, that we got the right people to be on the field to work for us. So if you're able to get the right people, you're able to train them, devoid of political partisanship. So we use our coalition members. That was our own way of quality checking. So before you get in as an observer, you must be from the network. So you know you are not representing yourself, you are representing your organization, and anything you do will affect not just you, but the organization that you represent, the network member. So we also built in some quality, we call it quality assurance, such that your response to questions will flag you out. So you can't just sit somewhere and give responses, just send in. There were a lot of things that we had to build such in. And so we also did simulation, trying it out and having some troubleshooting on the election day. So yeah, technology really played a good role in the polling, and also even for the work of Cordio. And the partnership was very helpful, and I thought I should quickly flag that.
Thank
So,
you.
Accountability is not just about waiting for the next 4 years and voting for leaders, voting them out or voting for them again. We think it's a continuous process, and it's important that we go out to the field. And so we partnered with a multimedia group to be out there to ensure that we gather citizens' expectation, knowing that we have to let governments know that citizens are observing, citizens are going to watch and not just allow them to do what they do. And also we have to use the polls to track government performance. There are lots of misinformation in the system, and how our politics has been done after election campaign continues. So you are not getting, sometimes things happen and you are not getting independent body to tell you what the truth is, or what really is the situation. You have government saying something different, you have the opposition, even at parliament we don't get the right information. So this is where the media comes in, and also use the polls to be able to track government performance, knowing that the citizens can get some independent information out there. What's the government doing? And the citizens are able to, they are in the field. I saw instances, there was a situation where someone, after the president's speech about the Agenda 111, the hospital, one guy on Twitter just sent someone there, went to take a video to show that, okay, yes, indeed, this hospital is not operational. And I thought that is what we should be doing, how we're able to have the media follow up on some of this, and not just call them and talk to them and say, okay, what do you think? Is it true? Is it not true? And then sometimes you're not getting, you are not able to differentiate. It requires a lot of, and there's so much information out there that it is difficult for some people to really appreciate what really is on the ground.
Awesome. Thank you, Vera. And I think I'll quickly like to reach out to Dr. Sapon to also give me his perspective on this, how the polling data can be looked at beyond elections. So, Dr. Sapon, over to you.
Okay, thanks. It's important that we track some of these things. Like Vera said, governance is a social contract between a party in parliament, or a party in government, and the citizen. I'll give you a typical example. I tend to try to use the health sector to buttress why we need to track what government does with polls, so that they know what the citizens. If you look at this whole Agenda 111 example Vera gave, this is the only time in Ghana's history where the president is putting out a figure and he's correct, the opposition is putting out a figure and they are correct, the Minister of Health is putting out a figure and he's correct. Meanwhile, it's the same project. And why has that happened? It has happened because different information have been put in different official documents by the previous government. If you track right from the start of Agenda 111, they put in, the budget was 1.277 billion. Then at a point in time, meanwhile, when they said 1.277 billion, in that same document, they had said that the average cost of each hospital was $80 million US. So if you just multiply that by 111, you got 1.998 billion US dollars, which is the figure that Ministry of Health has. So you see where it's coming from. Then when you go into the budget, you have if you go into the appendix, which interestingly, John was the one who directed the appendix. I always give him credit for that. You go into the appendix, and the appendix has 1.76 billion US dollars. Now, here's the conundrum. So you hear Dr. Isiasari say that when they were leaving office, they had disbursed 400 million and there's only 1.36 billion to go, which comes to the 1.76 billion, which is in the budget. You go to the Ministry of Health and 400 billion has been dispersed. So what Ministry of Health holds is that 1.5998 billion is what is left. You go to the president, and in the handing over notes, the president has been told that 1.7 billion is what's required to complete. So he's using that figure. Meanwhile, the Minister of Health in September gave a figure to Joy and Asase of 7.6 billion as what's required to finish it. The only way we can push back to a government that is being this disingenuous with numbers is by tracking it and people starting to tell them through the data that we are not happy with what you're doing. And we have picked up on these inconsistencies. And the thing about politicians is when they see it in the data that people are pushing back because it's a survey, even if they come and insult someone like Musa Danko, the truth of the matter is quietly in their corner, they look at the methodology and all that and they're like, hey, we are getting into trouble. And if we had done some of these things, a lot of the rot that we find when governments have changed hands wouldn't happen, because we would have been giving them real-time feedback as they gather. But now what we do is give them real-time feedback once in 4 years. And every time we give them that feedback, we are shortchanged because the country would have lost out. And that is why I feel that we need to track their performance and to speak back forcefully to them through some of these surveys so that they hear our voice in graphical, statistical fashion, and they are able to take the feedback and act accordingly and change their ways.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And I think we should end with Mr. Dankwa, seeing that you're in the business of collecting polls. What does it mean for you? Would you want your data to be used beyond the election season? Or let's just have your perspective on that.
Absolutely. If you look at what we are doing, we call it CSR, corporate social responsibility. And for that matter, we want the government to understand how people feel about where the country is headed. So if you see our poll, there are certain key questions that we will be asking till thy kingdom come. The direction of the country, the job performance of the president. In America, they've been doing that since 1950s. So you can track how each president has performed over the how many years. We're doing that now. How is the government performing in the eyes of the public? That they have won power, are they doing well or they are messing up according to the public? Now, we also want them to know people's style of living. How are they feeling? Is it getting better? Is it getting worse? Because once it's getting worse, you must know that you will lose favor with the people. Beside that, we are also copying some of the things that you have been doing at CDD. The ranking of most corrupt public institutions. We are doing this every quarter. So we can see who is improving and who is getting worse. We're also looking at state institutions that are most trusted. We're doing that. We copy that from you because we want to keep this in track or in check and report that back to the government to see if they can reinforce or can enforce more accountability or kind of corruption measures to make things better for the people of Ghana. Beside that, look, policy-wise, if you are proposing a policy, it is good you test it through public opinion so you can see how that policy can be refined, maintained, or even jettisoned. If you look at the e-levy that Sapon mentioned, before it was imposed, we did a survey on it and we showed how unpopular it was. And indeed, it was the reason MPP collapsed in the polls till the election was held. So the polls are very, very important. And if you ignore them, you may not get the signals that will be useful for you to be able to change course. And by the time you realize, it might be too late.
Thank you so much. Hopefully, it will not be too late for us as a country. Wow. So this has been an insightful discussion on the role of polling in Ghana's elections. Today, we've explored accuracy, challenges, technology's impact, and how polls can influence governance beyond elections. A very huge thank you to our speakers, Dr. John Osai Kopon, Dr. Kwame Sapon, Vera Ado, and Mr. Musa Dankwa for sharing your thoughts and expertise on this topic. And to you, our listeners, thank you so much for tuning in. Be sure to follow the Democracy Dialogues podcast for more thought-provoking conversations on politics, governance, and democracy. So until next time, stay informed and engaged. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the CDD-Ghana Democracy Dialogues podcast. Stay engaged, stay informed, and be part of the conversation on governance, democracy, and development. Don't forget to follow us on YouTube, Spotify, and visit our website for more insightful discussions.